Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. There are some who said, what really is channeling? How does it work within the human? And we've said at this point that it is a stream of intuition. So in order to channel, the teaching is this: you learn to recognize intuition and begin to allow it in a better way to form things that make sense to you. That's channeling. This particular channel, my partner says right now to me, you must title it. Now, that is not something that we would normally do with intuition, but we will. You might say, well, it's good to have a title and a subject on all of these messages so that we can have an idea of what it's about. Are you aware that you title every intuitive thought that comes to you? Right now, the title was and is and will remain, what was that? That's your title. That's what I want to do with this. What was that? But I'm going to title it anyway, and I'm going to call it The Puzzle. It's a grand story, and it's a story of human consciousness and the way you think and the way you act and what really has occurred. It's so interesting, is it not, when you take a look at humanity and what they believe, that even today, right now, there is a consensus. The consensus is among those who would take these kinds of consensuses that humanity in general believes in the afterlife. Statistically, they say over 80% of the billions that are here and who arrive and leave daily believe in the afterlife. And this, dear ones, is intrinsic. This is innate. This is what you come in with. And so therefore, there is the seed already of the belief that there's more. This then would give you questions about what is there that would create that, perhaps a soul. And that is the consensus as well. Almost universally on this planet, throughout all of the belief systems, there is that which is a vehicle you ride in, you're here for a while, and you move on. So that's the premise immediately. But what is interesting at this point in time is that you have free choice at any moment to examine that, to look into it, to ask the questions. Eventually you do. You would think that free choice would be a very positive idea. I have free choice, you say. I can go anywhere I wish. I can choose whatever vibration I wish on the planet. I am not forced into any belief. I can go and do what I wish with my own consciousness. In my own private time, I know what I want to believe. I have free choice. It sounds so positive, and yet, dear ones, it becomes instead a frustration, a puzzle. And the reason is because you sit, dear ones, in a low consciousness where that which you don't understand is beyond the veil. And so when you get to be an adult, there is a puzzle. Now, in a low consciousness state, the puzzle truly has been solved by so many. But I'm not there yet. When you are born into this planet, and as a child, you have many opportunities to watch the puzzle. You don't ponder these things. things as you grow. Not really. You may hear about them and have words about them. You may be even taught songs about them. But you don't ponder them with an intellect until you come of age. Past 6 or 7 years old, you have a model that is not necessarily spiritual, but it's a model of something similar. And in this culture, we're going to call it Santa Claus. Santa Claus, all-knowing, all-seeing, knows you, knows your name, knows where you live, and knows if you're good or bad. I'm right. This is the model of Santa Claus. And depending upon what you do as a child, you're told that there will be presents or no presents. So already there is the setup. An invisible force that knows who you are is looking at you and is ready to judge, good or bad, gifts or not. The premise is there, and the child believes it. All along in this illusion, behind the illusion, there often is a set of loving parents who back it up, and they are not the illusion. Quite often they are the ones that supply the gifts regardless. They are the ones who continue the illusion because it's fun and because there can be surprises and a lot of love. That's the Santa Claus premise. When you're about 7 or 8, perhaps before a little after the truth is revealed, you're old enough to know. And eventually it's okay and you realize the deception, and you will then use it on your children as well. But then some interesting things take place. These years between 7, perhaps, and even 10 or 11, depending upon the child and the gender, are interesting because this is where you solidify the puzzle. I'll tell you what happens. You're not yet in that place where you are pondering, for instance, life or creation, but you get to see what your parents have done with the puzzle. And so many on this planet are then taken to worship services of so many denominations and so many kinds. And in there you get to watch what your parents believe. And it's amazing. First of all, you see all grown-ups. You see some of them in costume. You see some of them in worship positions. You see some of them praying and crying, perhaps. You see some of them authoritative, perhaps, and speaking in another language, perhaps, of ancientness, of scripture, of doctrine, instructions. You see them all performing this in a huge building. That's important. Who builds these buildings? And the answer is, as a child, someone very important. They must cost a fortune. You're told that some of the buildings are 100 years old. And then you start to understand and cognize and realize this must be real. The adults believe it. Look, they dress for the occasion. Look, they're in costume for the occasion. It's real. And at that point in time, dear ones, even though as a child you don't cognize or ask the questions, you're indelibly stamped with what your adults believe. Sometimes without thinking, you then become them. Sometimes without thinking, you will come and go and come and go. You've solved the puzzle. This is who the Creator is to you. It's so interesting, is it not, that the Creator right now in this consciousness on this planet, with billions and billions believing in the God and the creation, but that creation consciousness is as follows. There's an invisible force. Call it what you want, God, Spirit, Creator. There's an invisible force who knows you and knows your name and knows when you're bad or if you're good. And you better watch out. Because when you leave this planet to that afterlife that you believe in, there's going to be reward or punishment. Does this sound familiar? That is where the consciousness of the planet is right now. How many would take a look at all this and ask the questions, is this correct, is this not correct? Am I simply repeating something I learned as a child? As Kryon, I am honoring of humanity, of their systems, of what they've done as far as they've gone. I am honoring of crossing through that 2012 veil that you might not have gone through. You weren't scheduled to go through. It was going to be the end of everything. Dear ones, you know this. The man who sits in the chair went through the Cold War. Many of you did not. He saw 50,000 nuclear weapons pointed at 2 countries. The man in the chair heard from his dying father on his deathbed that his father was sorry he brought him in at this point in time, at this point in history, because he wasn't going to survive. Because almost everyone, when polled, said there's impossible odds that you're not going to do it again. That's a double negative. You're going to do it again. It's going to be called World War III, and it's going to be short. And you know I'm right. Humanity has warred in all of these eons and these ages in a low consciousness, and one war leads to another. And there seems to be no Akashic remembrance, no innate instructions. There doesn't seem to be instinct from one generation to another that says, don't do that, it doesn't work, it's dysfunctional. That's called low consciousness. Generation after generation will grow up and do it again. Now here's what you know, but perhaps you not have heard this before. Most of the wars of the death in the history of humanity have been caused by those warring in belief systems of God. So much of the horror that has been presented from one society to another is because one society is not believing like the other society is believing, and they must be killed because of it. And some of the most precious of your belief systems and loving of your belief systems are guilty because of the low consciousness of what they've gone through and what they've done, from the Spanish Inquisition with Christians right down to those today who are radical, who will cut the heads off of Christians. Do you see that it has not changed? But something happened, dear ones, in 2012 that started to open a door of the allowance of seeing the puzzle again, differently. Right now, there is a light being turned on. And for the first time, humans individually are starting to ask questions about the puzzle. Up to now, I'm going to tell you in honor, not in criticism, but in honor of everything that you were able to do in a low energy that I've just described. Honestly, almost everything you have done regarding the knowledge, the organizations, the doctrines, everything that you have done regarding God has been the children's version. It's the Santa Claus version. It's not a criticism. It's a fact. And it's a fact because of the low consciousness that is now starting to shift. And the result of it isn't just in spiritual puzzle solving. Already you're starting to see the increase in the desire for integrity in all things. This comes mainly from the first world at this point. The one that's allowed to think and say and write and show. and many are not on this planet. This will start a revolution in puzzle solving. What do we do with the old energy? Why is this here? How do we eradicate this? How can we be more transparent? How can we change politics? How can we change corporate? How can we change drugs? How can we change? Because suddenly it all looks dysfunctional. That is evolution. But the biggest one, the puzzle, starts to show itself again. One by one, individual human beings, without even being prompted, without any evangelical thrust, without a new prophet, without a new system, without anything, are awakening to the puzzle. One by one, they're asking this question: could there be more than I was told? Could there be more than any of us knew? And the children's version starts to pass away. When you were told about Santa Claus, perhaps originally there was disappointment. When you learned there really was none, not really, there was disappointment. Those who start to ask the questions of whether their worship is correct or not, or whether God is really a judging God. How can God love you so much and then send your children to hell? How can any God torture a child who doesn't find out something in time? And that's the doctrine of billions. And yet it's not seen as dysfunctional because of the low consciousness of thought. It's just the way it is. Sometimes officials of the church are being asked, why is that? How could that be? How could that happen? And they will point to the scripture. They will say, well, God works in mysterious ways. We don't know, but that's the way it is. And that's when you disengage, dear ones, and start looking at the puzzle and say, I believe that the part of that is so real. That's the loving part. That's the Santa Claus that knows my name and is invisible and knows who I am. But that judgment part, that doesn't seem to really make sense. And the puzzle starts to then evolve. One by one on the planet, mostly old souls are awakening to the puzzle. It brings them to listen to this channeling. It brings them to a place like this, where every single one is different and unique and is not asked to follow one prophet or one book or one doctrine, but instead the puzzle solution is innate inside. I'll tell you, there's something more. That Santa Claus story, when you found out that it was your parents, you relaxed a little. You had a good time because that's where the love was. In so many of your houses, that's where the love was. Dear ones, you're graduating from the children's version and you're realizing that the Creator knows who you are, and that's where the love is. That's the real parent. You're starting to evolve the story and the puzzle starts to unravel. Is there something bigger than I was told? Oh, yes. But it's not linear. It's not another organization. It's not something to join. It's not a doctrine. It doesn't have rules or steps to climb. It doesn't have that which you're used to. You don't have to suffer a little. None of these things. Instead, you get to see something that you didn't expect. You're magnificent. In the eyes of the Creator, who knows your name, you're almost like a child of God. Magnificent in every way. And then that free choice starts to make sense. And then you have the freedom of understanding of a perception that might be higher than what you got when you were a child or what your parents taught you. Now, this is incredibly important. My instructions to you, as so many of you are at the precipice of asking these questions, my instructions to you are these. You are not betraying anyone, whether it's a pastor, a minister, a priest, or your parents, to think out of the box in this new energy that you're being allowed to have. And I say that because in a dark place, in a dark consciousness, it's the best to have. And with all love, intention, and purity, they would hand you what they thought was the best thing to have. And today, when the light is turned on and you see something else, and you see something perhaps more magnificent and better and beyond anything they said, it doesn't mean that you're betraying any of them to step into the light. Do you understand this? There is no betrayal. And this so often keeps those from even looking. I cannot do this. I cannot go there because I'll hurt this person or that person. It's not an organization, dear ones. This is your soul and your life with free choice. And if you start thinking, is there more? You've just opened the door of free choice for an angel to step in your face and say, yes, you got it. And you can't let go. Let's say you live in a house and there's a door that you're not supposed to open. And you creep over to it one night and open it, and inside there's light and there's things you've never seen before and there's magic. And you hear the voice say, shut the door! Bam, the door is shut. You creep away, and for the rest of your life, you want to go back to the door. Well, that's the door we're talking about. And the magic is things you were never told. It's beauty, it's love. It doesn't make anyone else wrong. It's not an organization. As I keep saying that, because it's not linear. It's you with the entourage of creation. And it starts to make sense. Even though there is no prophet, no doctrine, no book, no organization, no joining, all of a sudden you realize you are part of trillions, if not more, of souls who are starting to awaken all over. Not just this planet, dear ones. There is an awakening. As you awaken, there's other things that are going on this galaxy that mimic and mirror what this planet is driving. I haven't really said that, but that's true. That's why it's important. That's why you're here. That's the plan. Your awakening on this planet affects something else, some other place. And that's why the angels are rejoicing that you passed 2012. That's why there's so much cheering going on as you see the energy rise and the puzzle be solved. Kryon, can we really solve the puzzle? I'll say what I said in the last channel. Don't worry about the minutia. Step into the light and let these things evolve. And they will. Don't be afraid to sit there and be loved. This is the message, not just of the day, it's the message of the century. It's the message to a world that has passed the marker. It's the message of every channeler that is part of this retreat. In different words, we say the same thing. Leave this place differently. Leave this place differently than you came. And so it is.